For years, we have watched men and women die in a war that men in positions of power seem determined to ensure will never end. In this video, you'll see George Galloway praising President Trump's diplomatic move with Putin to stop the war. After Galloway's take, we'll share why common sense and moral courage are two key principles that can actually end this war once and for all. Before we get into the details, if you love diving into political issues and enjoy hearing a principled take on them, then hit the like button, share this video, and subscribe to join the conversation. It will help our channel reach a wider audience.
Is wall-to-wall in the United States media this evening that Donald Trump and Russia have been secretly away from the spotlight, negotiating a 28-point plan to end the bloody war in Ukraine. If it is true and if it succeeds, nobody will be happier than me and all of us here at the mother of all talk shows. This war, which should never have started in 2014, indeed earlier, if you count the steady encroachment on Russia's borders by NATO since the beginning of this century. But in hot war terms, this war has now been going on for 11 years, and that's long enough for any war in modern times. The death toll has been of First World War dimensions. 1 million, at least, Ukrainians have been killed, hundreds of thousands maimed, and many of those permanently. 9 million Ukrainians have run away from their country and are living in your country and may very well not go home. 180,000, 190 Ukrainian servicemen have deserted, and that doesn't count the tens of thousands that are now prisoners of war. It has been a bloody disaster, a long, Somme-like bloody disaster. Not only people in trenches, people cowering from drones that strike them and annihilate them with extraordinary precision and great regularity. That's leaving aside the missile strikes from both sides, but mainly from the Russian side, which has systematically eliminated Ukraine's air defense systems and systematically eliminated, one by one, the power plants on which their armed forces have depended. It's lights out in Ukraine. It was lights out even before the NBU, the National Bureau in Ukraine, National Bureau of Ukraine, which is now beginning belatedly to smoke out rampant corruption, the theft of hundreds of millions of dollars and euros and pounds, your dollars, euros and pounds, which has disappeared into the pockets of Zelensky and his criminal gang, which I remind you has long ago exhausted its democratic mandate. When I was saying these things, well, I was issuing Putin talking points. But now the Financial Times, the Economist, the Spectator, the New York Times, the Washington Post are all saying exactly what I have just said. Well, that makes them kosher, of course. And I just have to shrug off and bear all the insults and fake accusations that I was merely echoing Putin talking points when I told you that Ukraine was the most corrupt country in Europe before all this began. How corrupt do you now think it is that hundreds of billions of pounds, dollars, and euros have been poured in without auditing, without accounting, without even knowing if it touched the floor before it went, still shrink-wrapped in the boots of Mercedes and to the offshore resting places where it was intended to go all along. It's lights out in Ukraine, not just because of the corruption, not just because of the casualty rate, but because Donald Trump has very definitely tired of the conflict, and tired of the yapping dogs in London, in Paris, in Berlin, and even more yapping in the Baltic republics, trying to inveigle the United States into a war that would make Vietnam look like a children's tea party, that would make the coming assault, if it happens, on Venezuela into the same thing. A war between NATO and Russia could only end one way, and that is in a blizzard of nuclear, possibly thermonuclear, possibly intercontinental thermonuclear warfare, and the end of the human race as we know it. And Trump knows it. And he has, it seems, finally beaten down the congressional yapping dogs like Miss Linda Graham and others. He's finally beaten down the military-industrial complex and the mass media controlled by the Biden Democratic Party, which is the dark, dark days that lie ahead for the Zelensky regime may very well include the prosecution of some of the most important people, maybe including the most important person in Kiev. Certainly the head of the presidential office appears imminently to be going to be arrested. He has been given by my friend Che Bose, who knows what's happening in Ukraine better than almost anybody. He's given him 72 hours. So if the head of Zelensky's office is about to be huckled, how much longer can it be before Zelensky himself feels the breath of the Bureau of Investigation, that at American insistence, at Trump's insistence, is finally beginning to close down at least the most egregious examples. In the energy sector, $100 million theft. When we come to the defense sector, well, you can replace the word million with billions. These people have looted your money, and I told you so. And some of you told me that I was merely a mouthpiece for Vladimir Putin. Well, you ain't seen nothing yet. The 28-point plan may or may not exist, and if it exists, it may or may not be sufficient to end the war. But I've long thought that set-piece diplomatic encounters between Trump and Putin, with all the European lapping dogs in the anteroom, was not the way to peace. I have long thought that secret negotiations on the sidelines were the way to go. And as I say, if that is now what has happened, then sing hallelujah. Far too many people have died. Far too much treasure, including our treasure in the United Kingdom, has been burned on the battlefield of this war that should never have started in the first place. It requires the United States and other countries to recognize Russian sovereignty over Crimea, Russian sovereignty over all of the Donbas territories thus ceded, and guarantee, a better guarantee than Gorbachev got, I hope and trust, that the NATO powers will not only never recruit Ukraine into NATO, but will not be present in NATO at all.
Years of war between Ukraine and Russia have been encouraged by our political leaders in the West. They take our taxpayer money to fund the war while leaving our borders wide open. Illegal migrants pour in, and our countries fall into economic decline. At the very same time, the countries pushing hardest for the war keep buying oil and gas from Russia. Does this make sense? Common sense tells us this endless cycle does not add up. If the goal is to weaken Russia, why do we keep buying their energy resources which fund their military? It looks a lot like they are funding both sides of the war. To what end? Are any of our political leaders benefiting financially from all this? President Trump was battered and bruised by the fake news media and the Democratic establishment. 3 assassination attempts on his life, 1 bullet grazing his ear. They wanted him locked away for years. yet he withstood a system that seemed bent on destroying him. All the while, he kept fighting for freedom and national sovereignty. That is moral courage, facing the worst they can throw at you and still standing firm for what is right. As the Russia-Ukraine war raged on, our government kept pouring more gasoline on the flames. Amid all that madness, Trump stood out as the one voice calling for peace. Common sense tells us diplomacy is always better than endless war. Sending billions abroad while our own people suffer at home is irrational and immoral. Trump's decision to negotiate is common sense in action. Thousands of men and women die every week on both sides. European leaders and their families are nowhere near the battlefield, yet they insist the war must go on while hands, feet, and lives are blasted away. No other leader seem to care. Only President Trump, rising like a burning man from the ashes of a political arson attack, stood up and said, "I want this war to end. I want the killing to stop," while others whisper to Zelensky to keep fighting and promise, "We will back you for as long as it takes, even 100 years. President Trump stepped away from the cameras and negotiated a 28 peace plan with Putin. So far, it looks positive. The ball is now in Zelensky's court. Trump made it clear: agree or America walks away. Any peace plan still has to be judged honestly. Moral courage means we look at every part of the deal, make sure it is fair and can be checked, and that it is not just a pause for someone to build more weapons. Moral courage means we protect sovereignty and human life, even when that means hard choices or going against our allies. You may think protecting a country is difficult, but preserving common sense and the moral courage to act on it is much harder. Real leaders need two things above everything else: the common sense to see what is plainly wrong and the moral courage to stand up and fix it, no matter who tries to shout you down. Next time you watch the news or go to vote, ask yourself one question: does this person have the common sense to see the obvious and the moral courage to act on it? If you have benefited in any way from this video, please subscribe, like, share, and be sure to leave us a comment.